What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and basically combine a bunch of videos that tell one huge story arc into one big video. Now, of course, today's video won't be that big because we're covering the story called Superman Camelot Falls. Now, we actually covered this storyline a while back. I want to say possibly 2 or 3 years ago, but we only split this storyline up into 2 videos and that was it. Well, now we're going to combine those 2 videos together into one complete full story video. Now, basically, Superman Camelot Falls was a very interesting storyline where, of course, the main point of this storyline was that somebody from the past known as Arion, who was basically a ruler of Atlantis in the past, comes to the present day to warn Superman about the future, where in the future everything is destroyed, and apparently it is Superman's fault. And so now the question is, what is Superman going to do with that kind of knowledge that basically the future of the world will fall apart because of Superman? Now, with that being said, though, you have to remember this took place before the New 52. So this was pre-New 52 storyline. But I do hope you enjoy this story because honestly, it was a very interesting storyline. But I do hope you enjoy. With this story right here, this picks up at the point where Superman has returned back to Metropolis. And there was a point where Clark Kent gave up his Superman life to just be a regular person for a short period of time. But we see him fighting against a villain named Neutron. And Neutron is an old villain of Superman whose powers are based around radiation. All you need to know is that Neutron is someone whose powers made him lose his physical form, and so now his body is trapped inside in a containment suit. But the fight gets wrapped up very quickly, and we learn he's working for Inner Gang, which is a group I will explain more in a minute. But this was done as a way to say Superman is back in Metropolis to the citizens of Metropolis. This leads into Superman switching over to his Clark Kent role, where he goes into work at the Daily Planet. Of course, he is late, but this section was used to bring in an old character back, but also introduce a new character as well from Clark's past. This brings back Lana Lang, his old high school sweetheart. And then we hear about Carolyn Llewellyn, another lady from Clark's life, but after high school. But these ladies are requesting Clark Kent to do a story over them. But since he was late to work here, Perry White tells him he has to do all the low-level assignments for the day to be able to get those 2 jobs. And so you have Clark Kent switch back over to being Superman to deal with all of his assignments. But while out there, Inner Gang starts doing small attacks across the city. Inner Gang is a group of people who have advanced weapons. Superman and Cat Grant were able to take them down and their leader, Bruno Mannheim. Also, they got their weapons from Darkseid in a way. But while Superman was not being Superman for that short period of time, Inner Gang started to rebuild their organization in the city of Metropolis. And so Clark Kent's goal is to get rid of them once again. But he is still trying to do all of his assignments. He's having a hard time dealing with both problems placed in front of him. Now, it does get to a point where Superman says he had enough of dealing with Inner Gang, and so he goes to their base and runs into Bruno Mannheim, who was the leader of Inner Gang. But people thought he died when Ubuntu collapsed on him, except here he is, and he has been mutated into a huge giant. And so you have Superman begin to do battle with Bruno in the middle of the city, where Superman is trying to figure out how Bruno has been mutated. Is he working for Darkseid again? And Bruno says no, he's not working for Darkseid. But this fight ends with whoever Bruno is working for takes him away by teleporting him away. And so he is now gone, and that is it. And to close on chapter 1, we actually pick up with Carolyn Llewellyn in Kazakhstan, where we see her working at some facility. Apparently, the reason why she asked Clark here is because to show him something, some kind of experiment. We then pick up with Arion in the year 1659, and he was this guy who was a king of Atlantis or protector of it, except at this point of time, he was not. But we see him waking up after having dreams that apparently Camelot has fallen, some big catalyst event that happens in the future. But what starts the event begins with Superman in the current time. And so his goal is now to look into the future to see how Superman is at fault for the event to come. We then pick up with Clark Kent as he is interviewing Lana Lang. Again, she was the woman Clark dated back in high school, and she also knows that Clark is Superman. One of the first few people to find out actually. But something else to point out is that she married Petey, who was close friends to both of them. But they recently got divorced. Now the reason why Clark is interviewing her is because she is now in charge of LexCorp, and the board tasked her to fix all of Lex Luthor's mistakes and bring the company back up. Also to rekindle a friendship with Clark Kent as well. Now remember, he had a second assignment, which was to interview Carolyn Llewellyn, and she was in Kazakhstan with some kind of experiment. And while the plane that was assigned to Clark gets closer to the actual facility, he hears Carolyn calling out for help because the experiment got loose. Of course, it is wrecking the facility she was working at. And so you have Clark leave the plane and change into his Superman outfit to figure out what is happening. Where he finds Carolyn, and of course she is injured, but you have Superman ask her what is going on here while he deals with saving other people who could be trapped in the collapsed building. Now while he does that, of course something hits him and sends him flying across the place. And so now he definitely wants to know what is going on over here. This is where we get this short story of the fact that years ago, when the Soviet Union was around, there was this secret facility, and of course the same one we are seeing Carolyn in right now, where she says the facility was left behind. But when the Kazakhstan found the place, they found this experiment inside and it was locked up, which then led into them calling Carolyn in to figure out what this being is. And they labeled it Subject 17, and now of course it is fighting Superman. Now we do jump back into the past, where we pick up with Arion and we see him watching the events play out. And this is where he realized that Camelot Fallen is based around Superman, but he also realized it is 400 years in the future around Superman's time. He finds out that he is dead by that point and he cannot believe it. And so he decides it's time for him to go to the future to save the world. This is where we finally learn when Clark met Carolyn. Back when he was traveling the world after finishing high school, he was on a dig site as a helping hand. And one moment she was about to be attacked by an ancient bug that was trapped in the ground, and Clark had to use his powers to save her life. And this is the moment that makes her wonder more about Clark, but her being on the dig site and finding that bug led her into her career. But getting back to Superman and Subject 17 and their fight, we get a couple pages where we see at first Subject 17 speaks its native alien tongue, but while it is fighting Superman, it starts to pick up how to speak Kazakhstan, and it makes Superman wonder what other kind of abilities this alien being has. Now Carolyn just magically finds some more files that explain the origin of Subject 17. Honestly, the origin is just an alien couple spaceship crashed on Earth. The father was killed by being impaled by a metal pole, but the mother survived. She was pregnant and of course with Subject 17. She died while giving birth, but the Soviet Union scientists realized that Subject 17 was gaining powers and they were able to keep its powers locked away, which gave them the chance to test him in different ways. But of course, he was left behind and locked away until this moment right here. But getting back to Superman and Subject 17's fight, we see this fight actually get kind of wild here. But again, we are seeing Subject 17 begin the process of now speaking English as well, which makes Superman wonder how powerful this being is, because that is just one example of his psychic abilities. The other one is that it stops Superman in his place. Now, Superman is able to escape and continue to fight the Beast, except in the middle of the fight, we see Subject 17 get teleported away. And we then see Orion appear to tell Superman that he was the one who got rid of Subject 17, but also tells Superman that the end of the world is coming soon. That is when the story shifts over into the future, where we pick up with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, and where we see Metropolis is destroyed. But we learn from the diary of future Lois Lane that in the future, Metropolis was a city that was floating in the sky. But certain events started happening all over the world, where now the whole world is in an apocalypse state now. One of those events led to parts of Metropolis falling into the ocean. And she tells us that there are barely any human survivors left in the world. But while Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen are trying to meet up with Lex Luthor somewhere for some kind of mission, they get attacked by a bunch of cybernetic ninjas. Now, luckily for them, they are saved by this new character named Camelot, who seems to have the ability of a speedster, but not as fast as a Flash. But it seems like in the future, there are only a handful of metahumans left. And so right now, we watch Camelot fight until one of those ninjas was able to severely cut him on the back, which of course makes it hard for him to fight. Luckily for him, Lex Luthor and Parasite are here to help. And this is a sign that in the future, something big must have happened, where Lex Luthor and Parasite are actually helping to protect Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen. And this is to show something must have happened in the future, where both sides of good and evil came together. We also learned that Parasite had absorbed so much of Superman's powers that part of his memories are now trapped inside Parasite's mind. And so he knows almost everything of Clark Kent's life. Matter of fact, he knows that Clark Kent loves Lois Lane. But getting back to the present day, we pick up with Clark Kent, Lois Lane, Perry White, and Jimmy Olsen, letting Orion show them this future, where everything is almost gone. And at first, no one believes him that this is the future of the DC world. But he tells them how with the heroes always trying to defeat evil, evil comes back stronger and stronger, to the point where evil finally becomes strong enough to win finally over the heroes of Earth. The one person that led the world into the direction of pure destruction is a guy named Kyber, and this is his first time in DC Comics. But we learn this character runs an organization that sounds like a myth because no one really sees them. But he used his forces to do small tasks across the world to help his intentions on what he wants to do with the world. But his intentions led to a world that had a metahuman war, because he went around recruiting different powerful villains for each one to rule an area of the world. The heroes tried to fight back, but of course they failed. And when it got to a point that innocent people and heroes were dying by large numbers, that was when the heroes finally learned who was behind all of it. It was Kyber. And when it got to that point, it led to a battle between Superman and Kyber. And this is why Orion said that Superman is the main reason for the apocalypse state the world will be in the future. Because when Superman tried to fight against Kyber, well, Kyber was able to crack open the skin of Superman long enough for Kyber poison to get inside Superman's blood cells, which of course weakened him. And he then threw Superman into the core of the earth, which left everyone to presume that he died at that moment. Now, when he was thrown into the core, it led to the world to experience multiple natural disasters across the world, which of course killed most of humanity. After that, the metahuman world killed more of humanity. And this leads us into seeing what heroes are left Wonder Woman, a new Green Lantern, and the Flash. Now the Flash is actually giving his Speed Force energy over to Khaled, which makes Khaled a speedster. Long story short, this is it for the superhero community. In the close on chapter 4 of this book, we see that Superman did not die after being poisoned and thrown into the core, that he survived after all those years being trapped in the core, and now he's planning to come back to life. Now, part 5 of this story is actually more of a way to show us the final battle that takes place in the future, where we see the heroes who are left fighting against Kyber forces in one epic battle. And while this fight is going on, you have Lois Lane narrating what happened in this battle, how one by one each of the heroes that were left were killed off by Kyber forces. It was actually a bloodbath of a battle for the heroes. Now, where it seems like things cannot get worse than it already is, that's when you have Kyber appear, and to the heroes, they know if they can get rid of him, everything should end. And so you have Lex Luthor try, but of course gets defeated. But then at the very last second, you have Superman appear. Now this is Superman, who was already angry before he was locked away in the core of the earth. And so being trapped in the core of the earth and just hearing what is happening to the world around him just builds up his anger. And so when he finally broke out of the core, he is a person full of rage. And he is actually beating down on Kyber to a point where it seems like he is going to kill off Kyber right here and now. Except the problem is that Superman does not want to fall to Kyber level, and so he will not kill Kyber off, which then leads to a point where Kyber is able to kill off Superman. Now you would think this would mean that there is no way the world can be saved now with Superman dead, but that is when Khaled comes in and actually kills off Kyber from behind. And to the people who are left on the side of good, think this means everything should be good now. Except even with Kyber's death, the war continues on, with the metahumans who were working with Kyber begin to fight over territory, and it led to more deaths across the world. Lex Luthor dies, Lois Lane dies, and it gets to a point where Jimmy Olsen is the last person on Earth and he dies as well. A world where there are no longer any humans around. And so then this leads to the closing point of the first volume of this story, where you have Arion tell Superman that if he wants to let the world live, he has to let the world suffer, because every time he and the other heroes fight for humanity, something more powerful comes. It will get to a point that the heroes can't win. And so if Superman wants a different kind of future to happen, he has to let humanity fight for themselves. Meaning that he has to stop being Superman once again. And this is where we're going to stop today. So with the second half of Camelot Fallens, it opens up with telling us where Subject 17 has been at. Because remember, in our last video in the middle of the story, when Superman was fighting against him, he disappeared thanks to Arion. Remember, Subject 17 was this creature that crashed on Earth years ago, but a bunch of men kept him locked up and tested on him for years until, of course, Carolyn, who was Superman's old love interest, found him. Long story short, after Arion had teleported him away, he has been traveling around the world learning more about humans, because the only humans he knows about was the ones who tested on him. But picking back up with Superman, we see him hanging out with Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White, where these four were the ones who heard what Arion said about a future where mankind dies, all because of Superman. Since Superman and the other heroes keep saving mankind, humanity slowly loses the ability to strive for greater things. And with the heroes always defeating evil over and over again, that sooner or later something so evil and powerful is going to end the world, because the heroes kept saving humanity and not letting humanity strive to be greater. And we see that Jimmy Olsen and Perry White have different opinions on this possible future. And so you have Superman go visit Zatanna, who is a well-known person in the magic community and a close friend to a lot of the Justice League members. But you have Superman go to her to ask about Arion, since he is technically a magic user. The thing is that the Arion that Superman had met died a long time ago, but there has been an Arion in the current time of DC Comics. And so the question is now, who is the Arion that is alive now in the current time? But you have Superman ask her a few more questions about magic to help him fight against the Arion, the one he met. Now he goes to see Khaled, who is also known as Sirico, but we first met him in the future that Arion told Superman about, who has close ties with the villain Kyber, the one that kills off mankind in the future. And so Superman wants to know if Khaled knows where he can find Kyber, and hopefully stop Kyber before the future comes to exist. Now, Superman asked him about how Khaled gained his powers, which was a byproduct of Kyber really. But Sirico does not want to admit that, and so he makes up some lie to tell Superman. But when they do get on the Kyber subject, that's when things get very interesting, because Sirico, aka Khaled, tells Superman that he has been dead for a while. Now he says he was the one that killed off Kyber for revenge for killing his loved ones. And so right now, in his current time, there is no Kyber, and that is very interesting. Now you have Superman fly around to think more about what he learned from Zatanna, Perry White, and Khaled, because he still has doubts that the future Arion is talking about could happen. Except while he is thinking about that, you have Lois Lane contact him through his super hearing to come back to Metropolis because there are a bunch of children flying around. Now, before we can learn more about the children, we actually jump over to Arion that Zatanna knows about, the one who has been running around the current time of DC Comics, where we see him at the Oblivion bar. But while he is leaving the bar, he's confronted with the real Arion. And this is where we learn that the fake Arion real name is William Knightley. And back in Infinity Crisis, he and a bunch of magic users teamed up. Except he used the name Arion to gain respect from the other magic users, but he was caught by the real Arion to figure out why this man was using his name. Now getting back over to Superman, we see him trying to catch these children who are flying around Metropolis. This is where we learn that these children are from New Genesis, the home of the New Gods. And so these children are running around Metropolis causing havoc because they are having fun. Now this may seem kind of random to see, but this does play into the overarching story. And so you have Superman go and catch all of these children. After Superman was able to catch all of the children, that is when he is greeted by Light Ray, another new god, where you have him explaining that he and the children of the new gods were on a field trip around this galaxy, except something made the children come to Metropolis. That is when we see that it was Arion who did that to the new gods to show how powerful he is. But we see that he is watching over Superman and Lightway, having their conversation to figure out what is going on. But we see that the real Arion has kidnapped William Knightley to ask him why he has been going around the world pretending to be him, where of course he tells Arion everything that I have already stated, except he tells Arion in us how Arion died, where he was killed by Mordru, or his soul was taken by Mordru. Long story short, that is how he died, which gave room for William to become the new Arion. But getting back to Superman, you have him still talking to Light Ray, where you have Light Ray tell Superman that his friends will grab all of the children who are running around Metropolis. And he can also sense that something is on Superman's mind. And so you have him tell Superman to take the evening off and let some of the older new gods watch over Metropolis for Superman. Now, Superman does go see the two ladies who usually gives him great advice. The first one being Lana Lang, his first love, but she tells him that Earth is his home, even though he is an alien. Arion told him that he does not belong here on Earth because of that factor. He then goes sees his wife, Lois Lane, and Lois Lane tells him the same thing that Lana Lang told him, that Earth is his home even though he is an alien. But while being out with Lois Lane, he does hear something and he flies off to see that problem, which is a young girl falling off her balcony. And of course, she has to be saved, which of course she is saved by Superman and given back to her mother. But this is important because Arion wants Superman to let millions die so man can strive for greatness to have a future. But he lets that young girl die. It would have brought so much pain to her family. And so you have Superman go and meet up with Arion, where Arion asks Superman what is his final choice: keep being Superman and let the world die, or stop being Superman to hope the world will survive. Where of course Superman tells Arion no, and Arion did not like that answer. Now we also get another villain, but he is thrown in for a new reason, and it is the prankster. His name tells you what he's all about, which is to play pranks on Superman. That is really it. And he is watching the fight between Superman and Arion. But getting back over to the fight, we see Superman is trying to fight the mind control spell that Arion has put on him. Thankfully for Superman, he was taught by Zatanna on how to fight a spell like that. And so Superman is doing what she told him to do, and it seems like he is able to fight his way through the spell, except we get our first appearance of something new in Superman comics. We get our first appearance of Squad K, and this was a government squad that was put together just in case Superman has to be put down. Now we see Squad K in later comics going after other characters who are Kryptonian, like Supergirl for example, but for right now, they were sent in because they saw the battle between Arion and Superman. Also, they saw that Superman is trying to fight the mind control that Arion was trying to put on him. Now, Superman is trying to tell them that he is not under Arion's control, but of course, they are not listening. And so he flies away to protect the innocent people who were there at the scene. But while he is flying away, we see that Superman gets hit with a pie. Of course, this pie was a prank made by the prankster to shock Superman. But after dealing with the pie, Superman sees that the Justice League was also called in because they were afraid of the fact that he was mind controlled. And so you have him show that he is not being mind controlled anymore, and the fact that he is back in control. But he must leave them behind to find Arion. Now after the battle, you have Superman tell us that he lost Arion, but now he uses his supervision to see the damage from his battle. Also sees that the Justice League is trying to do some cleanup, but also sees that Batman is working on a new kryptonite ring to take down Superman if he has to. Also take care of the prankster robot that threw that pie at him earlier. But you have Superman go and talk to the leader of Squad K, which is Percy Hazard, where you have him tell Superman that the reason why Squad K was put together is just in case Superman does go crazy and has to be put down before he does real damage to the world. Where Superman understands and leaves because his main goal is to find Arion, because now Arion is trying to have the whole world look at him as someone dangerous to have around on Earth. Now there is a time jump where we see Superman fighting some gooey monsters with Zatanna. Now this of course is Arion's doing here, with him showing the fact that if Superman and the other heroes keep fighting for mankind, a more powerful dark being will kill off mankind. and these monsters are black and to represent the darkness to come in the near future. That is when Zatanna tells Superman that Orion has turned humans into these creatures. And so you have Zatanna and Superman work together to help turn these humans back to normal. But you didn't have the Phantom Stranger appear to give Superman some bad news. Is that basically he can't find Orion at all, which Superman was hoping he could find Orion for him. But we do get a couple pages where we see that the world is not falling for what Orion is trying to do, which is to make the world look at Superman differently, and that if he does not stop being Superman, it will lead to the end of the world, except the world does not believe it. Now, the second page is more of Lana Lang, who's in charge of LexCorp at the moment, talking to her board about some new kind of cameras that can broadcast all over the world. And these cameras are going to be used to record Superman's final fight with Orion down the road. Now we pick up with Superman thinking about everything, but also having a hard time finding Orion, where you have him be confronted by Subject 17. This is the first time that they have met since their last battle, where Superman realized that he is now using his psychic powers to gain the ability to speak to Superman normally, where you have him tell Superman that he knows where he can find Orion, except he is not going to tell Superman where Orion is at. And the reason why is because Subject 17 believes that what Orion is stating is that if Superman continues to be Superman, it will lead to the end of the world. And then it will make him very happy because humans kept him locked up for years and tested on him for a long period of time. If Superman wants to know where to find Orion, well, he's going to have to fight him and beat it out of him. And if he does, it will make Superman just like the humans. And so this leads to a battle between the two of them. But of course, you have Superman being able to beat down on Subject 17 to have him tell him where he can find Orion. After he does that, you have Superman show compassion as a way to say that not everyone on this planet is evil. Now you have Superman go to the location of where Orion is at, which of course is an old Atlantean outpost that no one knows about. Except when Superman gets there, he runs into a force field that blocks him out of the place. Except Superman does something that Orion did not expect, which was making a whirlpool that when it collapses, the whole weight of the Atlantic Ocean falls on top of the force field, which of course breaks it open, and this leads into the final battle between Superman and Orion. Now the story jumps to a point that took place before Superman fought against Orion, where he met up with the Phantom Stranger, where they have this discussion about the future that Orion is talking about. When you have the Phantom Stranger tell Superman that this could be the future, but at the same time, it is not. Only because the heroes have seen so many futures. For example, Superman traveled into the future where he teamed up with the Legion of Heroes. How would that future happen if the world is gone? And so you have the Phantom Stranger tell Superman that he just needs to be aware that anything is possible. Now, honestly, I could sit down and break down the fight because most of the book is really Superman fighting against Orion, where Orion does all these different magic tricks to throw at Superman. Where, of course, thanks to Superman working with Zatanna and also getting a gift from the Phantom Stranger, that Superman is able to take down Orion at the end of the fight, which of course makes it seem like Superman was able to capture Orion. Except we learn that this is not the real Orion, that this is William Knightley. See, what happened was the very last second, Orion was able to use some kind of spell to make it seem like William Knightley looked like him. And so when Superman gives William Knightley over to the authorities to lock him up, everyone thinks it is the Orion from the past. But in reality, the real Orion escaped back to his own time in the past. But there is still one thing left to point out in this story. You see, at the end of the book, we see that Kyber has awakened from his slumber. The guy who we were told that in the future will kill off mankind. Let me just say this now. No, he doesn't. I looked him up to see that maybe there was a story out there where he is the main bad guy in some epic book. The dude pops up like 3 more times, and one of them is only a flashback. And so that is it for Camelot Fallen, and it teaches Superman that the future is not always set, that no one truly knows the future. And this is where I'm going to end today's video. So guys, please leave me a like down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read? Well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'm out of here, and I will see you on the next comic book video. Later, guys.